Good evening and welcome to our viewers at home and around the world. This is Charles Sugrim from Globespan 24x7. And tonight, again, we do have so many events in Guyana to discuss. I know how much we'll be able to cover tonight, but I want to welcome you again to our Monday night program. And I want you to relax, sit back, and enjoy our program. Call your friends and family, let them know we're on the air. Share our views on Facebook so others can watch the program tonight. It will be very interesting, I promise you that. Tonight, we also want to thank Nohar Singh for making this platform available to us, and of course to Devin, our technical specialist. We want to hear from you tonight. So if you have your question for our panelists, please ensure you send it to Devin, and Devin will definitely post it online for us. So gentlemen and ladies, welcome to the program. Tonight, I believe Guyanese should be a very, very proud people. The highs and lows of the past 3 months were quite, if one can say, remarkable, and also I think I can put in very entertaining. No one would have imagined that our election could have brought the world together. Whether it was the United States, the Canada, the UK, the European Union, Organization of American States, the Commonwealth, Caricom, all observers, both local and foreign, they were all together singing with one voice. That has never happened in the history of our country. The election of March 2nd, they all declared were free, fair, and credible. Tonight, we are on the verge of having a declaration. As we all know, the Elections Commission met today. The meeting is now adjourned until tomorrow morning, and we're hoping by tomorrow, hopefully by the middle afternoon, we will have a pronouncement on who is the winner of these elections, according to Article 177 of our Constitution. Before I invite my guests to be part of it, I want to show our audience a clip from our president that was only recorded on Sunday, yesterday.
I'm very confident in Caricom's ability and integrity. And I'd just like to repeat what the ambassador of Barbados to Washington said, that Caricom is the most legitimate interlocutor on the Guyana situation. I'm inspired by that remark, and I share the sentiment that Caricom is the most legitimate interlocutor on the Guyana situation.
There you go. That is His Excellency, the President of Guyana, telling the nation that Caricom is the main interlocutor for Guyana's election. This afternoon, as we listen to some of the supporters of the APNU of the coalition, they are now discrediting the report submitted by Caricom. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight as we speak, our country is definitely split right down the middle. In these last elections on March 2nd, 242,000 Guyanese voted for the combined opposition. Of that 242, 233,000 voted for the PPP Civic. 218,000, just below 218,000 people voted for, and there on the screen we have it, just under 218,000 voted for APNU AFC. So it tells me, ladies and gentlemen, that our country is definitely split right down the middle. The PPP has won this election with 50.8% of the valid vote cast, which means that even though they have a majority based on mathematical calculation, and I know we have problem with math, but based on the computation of the numbers, the PPP has won this election. However, the PPP need to recognize that 50.8% is not 100%. So we're hoping that once the PPP is sworn into government, they will recognize that. Tonight, to take us along, we have three outstanding Guyanese I'm very honored to be a part of. We have Ms. Miranda Ann Lamb. She is the leader and the presidential candidate for the Citizens Initiative. And Miranda, we want to thank you because every one of us was going to your Facebook every single day to get the actual numbers that SACE and the others would have tabulated. So at like 7:30, everyone run to the computer to check what the update was for the day's count. So Rhonda, we want to thank you and your team for doing an excellent job in giving us that information. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I should do a quick shout out. That was from Shaz Ali. He's our IT man. And, you know, I just sent the numbers and the SORs, and by 6:45, tabulation ended at 6:30, and by 6:45, that was up. I remember one evening we were a bit late and people were letting us have it. So I have to give credit to Shaz for that. I can't take full credit for that.
Okay, and SACE is listening to you, and I hope in the next administration that SACE will use this young man as much as possible because you need people like him in the administration. SACE, welcome again to the show tonight. Your mute is on, SACE.
Sorry, thank you very much. We've grown accustomed to ease the feedback, so that's why we go on mute.
Yeah.
But thank you very much. I am grateful to be at this end of the wave, because when we started, we knew that it was not going to be 25 days. We were expecting it to be 40 days. I actually was telling all of my Christian brothers and sisters, this is going to be the 40 days as declared in the Bible. But fortunately, actually, it is 40 days.
Yeah.
So we were actually going to be 40 days from the inception. But it's good to be at this other end of the recount process. And as Caricom highlighted, this wasn't a recount. This was a full-fledged forensic audit.
Thank you very much, SACE. And last but not least, our presidential candidate and leader of the Liberty and Justice Party. I know Mr. Schuman gave up his Canadian citizenship, gave up his Canadian pilot. He was a pilot in Canada, a very lucrative job. Gave all that up to come to Guyana to be part of this, what we call rigmarole in Guyana. We thank you that you have stood up for Guyana, and over the past 3 months, the Guyanese people have seen in you a true leader. So, Mr. Schuman, welcome again to the program.
Thank you, Charles. Good night, Rhonda. Good night, SACE, and good night to the viewers. Let me say it's been an absolute pleasure to work with the two young people before me in that recount process. I think it was a fantastic effort that all of us played for vital part in ensuring. And I want to support SACE's position in terms of what Caricom stated, that this that we undertook was, even the order about a recount, what it ended up getting into or evolving into is into an audit of the electoral process. And we could talk about the Lowenfield report and all that stuff as we go on. So we don't want to preempt your discussion here. But I want to say it's been a very bumpy road in trying to serve Guyana thus far, and I don't anticipate that it will get any easier.
Thank you very much, Lennox and Rhonda and SACE. Edith Singh has started with a nice question tonight that I want you guys to focus on. Caricom, as the president says, will rely on that report. Now that Caricom has submitted a report, will the president listen and realize that it's time to admit defeat and hand over power peacefully to the new administration? Rhonda, you want to start us off?
He made that statement just about a month ago, the 17th of May. And it followed on the lead where he said initially that he has full confidence in Caricom, that he expected them to be able to, observe the process. So any report emanating from them at this point, I am going by his own words. I'm going by the fact that they saw the same process that I did. And so I have to, with all certainty, agree with the fact that, whatever he should abide, not abide, but he should respect what they have said because he gave them the full confidence. Not because someone isn't favorable to you. And let's face it, that report was not favorable to Guyanese, period. The term I used this afternoon was that they walloped everybody. So seeing Guyanese on show this afternoon, there's in that report, there's nothing to be proud of in it in that sense. And so I'd expect him to abide by, just using his own words and all of that process as we move forward. Now, ultimately, what I've seen on social media and coming out of, even I heard briefly Mr. Alexander, who is one of the commissioners at GECOM representing the government, we are going to have some issues. There doesn't seem to be, they're questioning whether or not a Caricom team being so small were able to look at all of the stations where they're only talking about 400 plus. So we're already seeing the signs. And there have been attempts to disparage one particular Caricom team member. So we're seeing the signs that his words, at least what his supporters so far, they're not ready to accept that. And I suspect at this point, given everything we've known, I don't see him accepting it either.
You don't see President accepting this, what you're saying?
When I say not accepting it, we're seeing the supporters saying, we don't agree with it. I don't see I see a battle coming. That's me. So his actions at this point will have to, if he does differently, it's at odds with what he said a month ago. But everything that I've seen in the last couple of months, I don't see it going down very easily and him just accepting it and saying absolutely yes, I agree, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's very important to note. Lennox, do you think when Mr. Lowenfield submitted his report, I think, again, as I said, Guyana is split right down in the middle. And when Lowenfield submitted his report, the half that voted for APNU AFC rejoiced that report reflects what came out of those recount stations. You were there. Did the report that Mr. Lowenfield submitted, did that really reflect what happened in the recount process?
Charles, the issues that are contained in Mr. Lowenfield's report were, let's start with the order. They're in contravention of Article 6 of that gazetted order, which talks about the process for the observation report, what needs to be in there and stuff. And when they descended upon the Arthur Junction Center, on May 6th, I made the remark to the effect that they have lost the elections, they have lost their ability to stop the recount. So what they are now going to try to do is to undermine the electoral process. And keeping in mind that these are Mr. Lowenfield presented figures, Mingo's mangled math figures, to the commission to be voted upon. So when we got to the Arthur Chung Convention Center, it was not about executing a recount. We saw all of the delays. We saw all of the injection of what I'd say allegations, unsubstantiated, baseless allegations that populated those observation reports. And when we complained about those things, our complaints were not taken on board. They were met with resistance by the DCEO because Mr. Lowenfield wasn't there every single day to listen to our concerns. Most of it fell to Ms. Myers. Now, what they did was literally plucked everything that APNU AFC put in those observation report and transplanted that into Keith Lowenfield's report. So I don't see that the report, in my view, was produced by Mr. Lowenfield. I think he had help from Congress Place, and that's just my view. And I think that the Caricom folks in themselves, they're not juniors at electoral observation missions. And they stated it quite clearly on page 8 of their report when they talk about this was a fishing expedition, and they threw a net as wide as possible, hoping to catch something. And what they caught was, let me see if I read it correctly. It says the anticipated harvest ended in slim pickings. That's on page 8 of their report. So the idea was not that they were going to find anything of substance. When you look at what the issues were with the ballot boxes on the coast, when some of the DROs are saying that, and some of the DROs are saying that they received specific and explicit instructions from the clerk to exclude material which is contrary to their training, then they obeyed because it came from a superior officer. So once again, Mr. Lowenfield's report, I find that it is very, very offensive to just the average Guyanese because of all of the falsities that are contained therein.
Thank you. Sis, Mr. Lowenfield, as Lennox was talking a minute ago, I seem to try to bring the report together with the talking point of APNU AFC. And it seems to me also that Mr. Lowenfield's report was prepared by Congress Place. I might be wrong like Lennox, but what I'm saying is that almost everything that APNU AFC spoke of in their talking point to the media during the recount was actually in that report. So is Lowenfield, in your view, a part of Congress Place?
There is a variety of opinion on Mr. Lowenfield's report, and the attitude of mind that is behind that report. I want to look at it a bit differently. I want to look at it as someone who walks with the law. And I'll tell you straight up. An order number 60, was made to prescribe the way we conduct this so-called recount. However, as we said, it's not a recount, it's an audit. And that, in paragraph 12, it clearly prescribed that the participants, we, meaning Ray and Lennox and hundreds of other young Guyanese, in addition to the local observers as well as the international observers from the European Union, OAS, Caricom, of course. We witness a recount process, in addition to that, an audit that verified 460,352 valid votes. From that recount, we also witnessed 10 tabulation certificate authenticated by GECOM, not the political parties, the tabulation supervisor and the district coordinator. And when that tabulation certificate was authenticated by GECOM and observed by us, but authenticated by GECOM, it was then transmitted to the CEO to help him to produce the report that he subsequently had to send to the commission. Now, that report ought to, by law, have two elements. It was supposed to have the summary of the tabulation matrix showing how this 460,352 valid votes were distributed as per political list, whether how much TCI get, how much LJP get, and so forth. And secondly, it's supposed to have a summary of the observation reports, which by and large we've established now are allegations, which are not facts, but allegations. That was his job. but he decided to bolt on a third element to his job illegally and started to interpret these allegations to arrive at a conclusion that is outside of his mandate. And that is where I think he went off the road. Because when you look at this report, in the first few pages, you have the summary of the tabulation matrix, which is accurate. You also have the summary of the observations. But then beyond that, he started to then decide, well, I will take the power to deduct from the legitimately counted ballot votes so much thousands because of the APNU felt this way. Now, that is where I thought he went off the road and can be accused of being a utensil of the APNU. That is what I saw.
Thank you, Sis. Rhonda, Abid asked a question online, and he says, in his view, the recount should supersede any other prior declaration, the previous declaration. And I think Ron Singh mentioned, and this might be hilarious, the PEP has won this election now the third time. I mean, what is your view? Does this recount that was just completed, that the report is submitted by Lowenfield and the Caricom team, will this recount supersede all prior submission to the commission?
Now, in the context of recounts, at the end of the first count, meaning the E-night count, if parties were not satisfied or they had queries, they could have asked for a recount. Now, had that recount been granted at the time, that recount would automatically supersede the E-night count. So if we're following the law in that sense, and the law does provide for those kinds of recounts, then obviously this recount will supersede any previous counts, well, the E-night count specifically. However, where we have, and I think this is not just me saying this, we have an issue where those 10 declarations were not squashed. They are held in abeyance. So the issue with that is that they're still legally valid. And therefore, we have, given all of the issues with the Yulita Moore case and, the filing that she would have made on behalf of the APNU AFC. I mean, we heard that it was a private citizen, but she was a candidate for the coalition. At the end of the day, whilst legally the recount can supersede, and it should, in my estimation and opinion, we still have that pesky situation of those 10 declarations held in abeyance. And of course, the CEOs, because again of how his constitutional position is enshrined in the in ROPA, what you have is his report to the commission is at odds with what everyone else is saying and up to today which Caricom produced. So there is that. I'm not a lawyer here, so there is that. For me, there is still that pesky 10 declarations sitting in the corner waiting their coming. But for me personally and for TCI, this recount should supersede any other numbers that came before it.
Thank you, Rhonda. Lennox, maybe no. Okay, let's start with Lennox. Lennox, we have two reports. We have the CEO report, we have the Caricom report. I listened to Mr. Nandalal from the PPP, and he said he spoke with Mr. Lowenfield at the end of the count. And he said to him very clearly, he said, two things you need to do, according to the order. One, prepare a summary, tabulate the numbers. As Ronald just mentioned, that should now supersede any other. He did that, and he actually present the correct number from the recount. Secondly, he said, is that you're supposed to do a summary. And a summary means exactly that. We do précis in school, we do comprehension in school. So a summary means that we need to, of all the objections that were made, summarize it and give that report to the commission. I would believe a report, maybe 2-3 pages, single space, 12 font, I think would be more than sufficient. But he went on to do a detailed report and made recommendations, what he saw, what he thinks should be, and using allegation to make that those recommendations. The thing is this, Lennox. Mr. Lowenfield, as we've heard throughout this exercise since he submitted his report, he has been the CEO for an entity called the Elections Commission. He got $8 billion Ghana dollars to run an election. He is the person employing all the staff, the election day staff and all the support staff that work with him. Yet at the end of the election, he's telling the world, you know what, despite all of that, I am grossly incompetent. What is missing from his report is his resignation. Because I think as a CEO, and you run business, sales run business, Rhonda, I'm sure business activity, a CEO want to do the best for the company and will try to hide all the anomalies, all the problems or the faults to ensure he give a good report. This man did exactly the opposite. What do you see happening next? Should this man still have a job after this declaration is made?
Charles, at this point, I think that is a question for an inquiry of some sort or an inquest into what transpired at the Elections Commission. But I want to touch on the part you spoke of with Mr. Anil Nandlal. If you look at the order under Part 11, or Article 11 of the actual order, it talks about the compilation of those numbers. Nowhere in there, I mean, all it talks, if you go on to Part 12 of the order, and I have the advantage because I have it in front of me, I don't know if my colleagues do, but Part 12 talks about compiling the matrices and the report, the observation report, to precede them. But if you look at Part 11, there is no obligation for the Ghanaian Elections Commission to have a discussion on the observation report. It simply talks about him producing this report with the numbers, and then the Ghanaian Elections Commission discuss those numbers, whether or not it should be used to give that declaration. Now, I'm very happy that ANU and United Guyana submitted their findings in terms of the Mingo's numbers to Madam Chair and the Commission. Because with that now as evidence and having seen it come out in public, it now puts a dark shadow over the previous declaration for Region 4. And that being said, we have no other fallback position except the commitment by Mr. Granger, all the political parties, including the leader of the opposition, that the Recount numbers will formulate the final numbers for this electoral process. That was a commitment at the outset of this, and Mr. Granger even said that. When he talked about the Caricom team coming here, and we'll get into that, but when he talked about all of these things, he said that he is going to respect what the Ghanaian Elections Commission declares. And our understanding, based on his position and that of all of the other political parties, is that the recount numbers are final, and there is no recount to the recount going forward. We have concluded this exercise to finality. So it is now, do we now permit 3 people to hijack the entire country? Because that is what it really boils down to. Madam Chair would be happy to say, you know what, I don't have to vote because all of you are doing the right thing. So I'm going to sit out, and the motion is carried 4-2. But we know that is not going to happen. So basically, we have 3 people who are holding this nation hostage at this time, and that is Mr. Vincent Alexander, Mr. Trotman, and Mr. Corbyn. And I find it, I was having a discussion earlier on the very issue that it is unfortunate and it is sad that we are at this juncture. Very, very unfortunate and sad. Mr. Trotman, who represents the Working People's Alliance, whose leader was killed 40 years ago by the very party who is trying to hijack these elections, can sit there with a straight face knowing that the party that was responsible for his leader's assassination, granted we needed to grow and all of those things, but they're putting him in a position that directly contradicts the WPA's founder and leader's position when he was fighting for democracy and empowering the people. And I find that very, very disheartening to know that so much of our bloody history in that sense would just go down the drain just because of the very same party wanting to hijack democracy.
Thank you. Gentlemen and lady, I want to get into the Caricom report. Before I get into that, Sis, my concern is if, as Lennox just mentioned, if we have the three PP commissioners and the Madam Chair voted for, or let's assume that happened, will they now go to the court and say that's not a majority?
Well, I'm also not a lawyer like Ray, but I can tell you it will be ludicrous because, again, a majority vote on any board is a majority vote. And of a board of 7, if we do mathematics, the division is 4-3, will be a majority. But recognizing what has happened since the Caricom released their report, all I have seen since is people who have endorsed Caricom as the final arbiter on this process. The narrative has now flipped, and I am seeing a narrative that they represent. There were only 3, and hence they were unable to efficiently monitor and pronounce on the recount process. But what these people do not understand, as Mr. Nicholas Boyer, the chairman of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, had said, in addition to the Caricom observers, there was the OAS, there was the European Union, there was also the embassies, there was also the local observers. And what has happened in the local observer community, which are independent of the political parties, they were covering 100% of the workstation. And they've already concluded that the Caricom's opinion is an accurate reflection of the opinion of the local observer community that covered 100% of the workstations. So while the narrative being pushed out of Congress Place is to pick holes at Caricom, the evidence is lining up to show that let's forget all the political parties, but the observer group covered the entire process 100%, and their conclusions have much similarities. That the 360,000 votes represents the will of the people. And it's only, and I'll use this word lightly, but I need to use it, it's only a delusional mind who will want to deviate from that fact. And you see, this is a war between facts and fiction. The facts are, and it will remain, the 10 tabulation certificates that were concluded from a count process. The fiction is some allegations that remain unproven. And Caricom in their report quite clearly talked about the unproven migration voting, the unproven phantom voting, and the unproven implied voter impersonation. It is a figment of someone's imagination. And I'm disappointed Mr. Lowenfield for allowing himself, but forget him, allowing his office to be stained forever because of that report that he produced.
Yeah, and that's a excellent point. Rhonda, you studied the report, Caricom report.
I did.
All of you, I'm sure, read the report. shouldn't the supporters of the coalition come out and defend democracy? Every country in the world have elections except North Korea and some other dictatorship. But all countries with a democracy have elections. And we know in an election, one party win, the other one lose. And the process continued. The next election, you have an opportunity to come back and present your platform, your program to the people, and the government in place might do a lot of crazy things and you might be reelected again. Caricom has, as you said in your opening remarks, Rhonda, they've really indicted Guyanese. We are not, they're actually saying you guys can't run anything. I mean, what more does the coalition need to understand that they have lost the election based on the recount and move on and allow the winner of the election to be sworn in?
You have to understand, the coalition knew it lost the elections, I would say the earliest, like around midnight of March 2nd, but most definitely by the morning or midday of March 3rd. They had all their SOPs and they knew they had lost. So it isn't a case of them not knowing they lost. What we had was almost, I want to say, because I was at Ashman's building as well, I want to say it was almost a shock to them that they had lost. And so by this point, how do you say to your supporters, because remember now at this point you've said they're free and fair elections, everything was run smoothly. So naturally, going into Region 4, where you have 50,000 votes to come across and you crunch the math and you do the numbers, this was a case of saving face, I think. So at this point, the narrative has been well sung into APNU, AFC supporters' ears that there were irregularities. In fact, they're not even using the word irregularities anymore. They're using the word fraud. And so at this point, there is no APNU AFC supporter, I think, that I've seen, just scanning social media, who is going to believe that they lost in a fair and transparent process. So what you have was leaders who spun narratives. One that distressed me greatly was them saying to the discipline services, the police force, the army, and all of them, your ballots weren't stamped, they weren't counted. And despite people going out there and saying this is not true, showing the numbers, showing all the figures, they still kept pushing that narrative. So it isn't a case of whether or not accepting democracy, and democracy means different things to different people. I've learned that over the last year or so. So it's not a case of accepting the will or accepting in a democracy that this is how you live. The APNU AFC supporters are responding to what their leaders and the leadership of the party for months, for 3+ months, over 100 days now, kept saying there were irregularities and the recount will show it, and then they showed up and who died and migrated, and it didn't matter what you said. So at this point, democracy is not a conversation you're going to be able to have successfully with them. A narrative was spun, it was kept at, it's still being pounded into people's ears up to a few minutes ago. And so democracy conversations are not one you're going to have successfully with persons at this point who support the coalition.
Right, thanks, Rhonda. Gentlemen, Lennox and Sis, before we go to break, we heard the PNC, APNU AFC started with the list is bloated. But a list don't vote, people do. And we know that to vote in an election in Guyana is very, very meticulous. It's really, to defraud the election in Guyana, you have to be a genius. I think you got to be an Einstein. Because the process to vote, everyone knows, and APNU AFC knows that very well. So I know why they're pushing that narrative, that the list is bloated. Then dead people vote. Then migrated people vote. Then all these different things not in the ballot box. can you blame the voter for things not in the ballot box? Isn't that an indictment on Lowenfield and GECOM? Lennox and then says.
Well, Charles, I'm glad that you brought that up because Madam Chair herself actually had in her ruling in the Esther Pereira case in 1997 similar arguments about the importance of not disenfranchising anyone. And in that very ruling, which I read most recently, it speaks about the issues of denying someone their franchise, either by that person not having requisite document. Remember, this was the ID card voting issue, or whether it is by error of the Guyana Elections Commission. And what she said, and the arguments in that case were that you cannot deny someone their franchise in either of those cases. Once they, let's say, you cannot put a new requirement on them to have an ID card when it is not written in the Constitution as one. But if by virtue of an officer's act, that person is disenfranchised, then that is a violation of the law. So you can't use that argument to say now that these people's franchise cannot be counted. She made that ruling in the Esther Pereira case. And I think I'm very happy, at least I take some comfort in the fact that she would have adjudicated that matter, and having that knowledge in these elections, there is no more qualified person in this country at this juncture than her.
Thank you. Sis, your thought.
I honestly believe that that I was pleased when, you know, those 20-something boxes that didn't have some documents in it, but it had the valid ballots in it, were counted. And that was because of that same argument. The Madam Chair, staying consistent with that ruling, said people's vote has to be counted. So that was the consistency. But that whole hullabaloo was being blown out of proportion that, oh, these votes were invented and so forth. The reality is, and I want to go back to what Rhonda was saying on when they figured out they had lost. The reality was, you know, there was a point when 9 of the regions were completed and the PBP was ahead by 51,379 votes. And at that point in time, the APNU knew that they only had 36,021 votes lead in Region 4 or District 4. And that is when I believe that they decided to take away people's franchise. So they are doing exactly what they're accusing other people of today. They've done it because what we have proven empirically with facts after the recount was done was that Mr. Mingo inflated the PNC's number, or APNU PNC is the same thing, the PNC's number by 19,116 votes and stole, I want to use that word deliberately and carefully, stole 3,689 votes from the PPP in order to gerrymander an outcome that allowed for the APNU to win the elections. But when the recount was done, it reestablished the fact that in those 9 regions, the PPP was able to expand its gap in front of the APNU by some 58 votes. The outcome after those 9 regions were done is that the PPP got 51,431 votes, which far supersedes the 36,021 votes by which APNU won Region 4. And if you do mathematics and arithmetic and you don't go to the school of Nigel, you will realize that the PPP won these elections hands down with 233 plus thousand votes versus 217 1,920 votes for the APNU.
Thank you very much. When we come back, Edith Singh make a good point. Government need to make changes because everyone need to feel that they're part of something. When we return, I want us to discuss the way forward. Now that the election is behind us, we presume tomorrow the Madam Chair and the Commission will declare the winner of the result. Now that the new road begin. So when we come back, let's talk about the way forward and how do people feel that the government will be part of the new government. We'll be back shortly.
This is Richard David, a man championing the cause of the people, a leader who wants to take his district to the next level, fighting for affordable housing, fair property taxes, fighting for tenants, fighting for protection and healthcare for all, especially immigrant communities and undocumented workers.
I'm the opposite of Trump. I really am. I'm the candidate that came here without my papers. I'm the candidate. I am the American dream. My family came here and worked our butts off to rise up, and we're contributing to our society. We're taking care of our neighbors, and that's what immigrants have done forever in this country. That is the story of America.
Even before COVID-19, Richard has been there for his people. He is a man who has worked in government for 10 years and knows how government works. He is the man who will make a difference. He is a man who will fight for you.
We need to rise up. This is our time. If we don't make our voices heard now, we're going to continue to be ignored. Rise up, come out, vote. Please make this our moment. Vote for Richard David, District 31, and the elections on June 23rd.
You can count on Richard. Rise with Richard. Let's rise up together.
Globespan 24x7 is offering professional streaming services. Be at ease and let Globespan 24x7 handle all of your streaming services for talk shows, religious programs, funerals, and birthdays. Get professional streaming done with ease. Globespan 24x7 professional streaming services will give you the peace of mind that you deserve. Call 631-782-9272. That's 631-782-9272. Or email sales@globespan247.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our program. And as we mentioned before the break, I know one of my colleagues, Ms. Ram, said, Charles, you're very hopeful. Well, being a Christian, it is good to hope, right? For hope it's something that we can live for, knowing that good things will come. And we pray God that somebody mentioned that the new president-elect, Dr. Ali, is a doer. And I think Sis also testified to that we have seen him all across Guyana for the election. I don't know, Sis, which area did he not visit in the last couple of months when he was campaigning for the election? Because every time you look at Facebook or in YouTube, the guy was somewhere across the country, all over the place. I think he did far better than Mr. Schuman did in his community. Where did he not visit? Your mute is on.
I don't want to comment too much on that because I don't want to give away too much of the political strategy. But very, very important was, Mr. Granger thought that he was frustrating this country by delaying the elections. He actually gave away the election by delaying it. Because anyone with any common sense, any iota of common sense, who's aware of the political demographic map of this country will know a couple of things. One, 39% is Indo-Guyanese, 29% is Afro-Guyanese, 21% is mixed Guyanese, and 11% is Amerindian Guyanese. The Amerindian Guyanese is the key to success in the 2020 elections. It was a fundamentally important constituent. And to really be successful in that constituent, it required time, it required resources, and it requires hand-to-hand contact. You ask many of the communities, the Amerindian communities, if they've ever seen a man called David Granger, and they will say, I don't even know who he is. Irfan Ali went to every single Amerindian community in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. That's one thing I want to say. The second thing is the country has gotten much younger. A constituency, 65% of Guyana is below the age of 35. And you could have seen from the operations of the ACC, the movers and the shakers and the doers are much younger than the movers and shakers and doers from 10 years ago. I met people who were 18 years old working as part of the URP team, and I asked the young lady, what are you doing here? I was being stupid. I must acknowledge that. And you know her response to me, and she looked me straight in the eye, and she said, why not? That simple word, why not? She should not be doing her work here. And I shut up after that, because that is the kind of attitude of mind this new Guyana is. It's younger. It's not taking nonsense from politicians anymore. It demands reasons why I believe Mr. Granger lost. In addition to destroying the sugar industry, why he lost is that he disconnected from a significant constituent. They could not log on to him. They could not identify with him. He was an alien to that 65%. And fortunately, Irfan Ali did quite nicely, just like Lennox. If you look at Lennox at the ACC, he logs on pretty nicely to the younger people, and that's beautiful. I mean, it's lovely to see that Guyana has so many younger, more inspirational politicians in our midst. And it beckons a period of great renewed hope. And I am confident because I know Irfan Ali from many years ago. And I'm confident looking at his track record, we are going to dig out of what was left for us. And let me make this last point. I need to talk about the model, the governance model, but I'll talk about that after, but not this time. But I want to make this last point. This last point is this. We have to embrace and engage each other. No one party can go it all alone anymore. 51% doesn't equal to 100% anymore in Guyana. The biggest mistake Mr. Granger made when he got 50.3% was to disengage from the other political forces. I am convinced the wisdom that I've seen from Irfan Ali, Dr. Irfan Ali, is that he will engage. And let's give the young man a chance and let's grow Guyana. I'm hopeful for Guyana. Even though it was a tough period, I am very hopeful for Guyana.
Thank you, sis. Rhonda, we see your beautiful daughter there. Rhonda.
My son, actually.
Oh, your son, sorry. Rhonda, last week I was kind of disappointed when I asked Lennox and Tim, they're in the joiner list, and they together, they won a seat in the National Assembly. And I asked them, will you work with the president, with the new government, if you're called upon? And I didn't get a clear answer. My point is this: if the president calls you to serve, why would you tell the president no when, as we understand for the last 3 months, the young people has taken the lead? And I believe, as I said last week, Guyana is not a loser. Guyana is the winner because the young people has now taken the lead. President Ali is 40 years old, a young man. You, Rhonda, a young man. Sayes, a young man. Lennox, a young man. All of the people I've seen on television from ANOG or from TCI or from LJP or from Mr. Battle's party or any other party, they're all young people. So my question to you, Rhonda, is if President Ali calls you and says, Rhonda, I need you to be a part of my government, what will your party do?
We have not, as a party, we have not discussed any of those issues in that sense. Like we've said, if you've noticed, a lot of young people took part in these elections as candidates, as well as persons who would have, especially for the recount. However, what we have here is all of these persons would like to be independent. TCI has not earned a seat in Parliament. As such, this call on that, we are to expect in terms of our numbers, I don't see that happening. So I can't say that I won't work or I will not work, but I know that any assistance that can be given to people of Guyana that I can contribute to in the sense, and TCI here at this point, I'm not speaking specifically about me, is we are interested in the service of Guyana and ensuring that every single Guyanese is represented. This ultimately, however, means that we have to keep our independence. Any positions for us that would compromise that and would interrupt in that process is a no-no for us in that sense. So for us, it is a very thin line, a very stickler line that we have to follow in terms of keeping that independence and ensuring that we are keeping the incoming government, on their toes. And so I think I understood why you had that hesitation from Tim and from Lennox as well, is that it is that independence that can be compromised. And so unless you see the scope of what is being asked of you, that is going to cause an issue. So it's mostly about, we are at the point as young people, well, I'm not so young anymore, but it is that independence that we'd like to keep. We've seen too many persons, especially in the last coalition, where their independence was compromised. And so what we have and had literally was persons who were unable to, be objective in that sense. So for me, it's purely an independent streak. And I would like to be able to criticize when I want to criticize, and there are no hands muzzling, my mouth, and there is no reward for me that, allows me to have to shut up.
Thanks, Rhonda. Lennox, Mike, 1 second before you, 1 second, Lennox. Sorry, Mike Mukraj stated a pertinent question here on a statement. What Kennedy says: ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I listened to Rhonda, and I understand that, but I don't think if a President Ali calls any of the, or all the political parties, I know Tim was saying, call APNU AFC because they won 46% of the votes, and that is true. But the thing is, you need to bring people in who can work with you for the development of Guyana. And I'm not saying APNU AFC people will not work towards development. I think a lot of good people are in there. But my point to you, Lennox, is that why would we want to not serve our country if you're called upon to do that without giving up your independence, as Rhonda rightly mentioned?
All right. I actually want to step back a little bit to one of Cesa's points. And I have to disagree with him that Dr. Irfan Ali visited all indigenous communities because the numbers in themselves don't lie. And I know all of those indigenous communities. I've been to some of them, and you could ask some members in those communities the very same question. Do you know who Mr. Irfan Ali is, or do you know who Mr. Granger is? And they would tell you the same thing. I've only read of him, but I don't know who the person is. Is that him or is that him? Right? And I know because, once again, those are the communities from which our numbers as the Liberty and Justice Party came, amongst some others. In terms of your question, and I want to go to what Rhonda said there, the independence component, we have to remember the formation of the Liberty and Justice Party and the place for indigenous peoples in Guyana. When we started off, it was recognizing that no administration has done anything of significance for the indigenous peoples of Guyana. And that is the premise under which the Liberty and Justice Party was formed. We're not exclusive, but those were the focal points in how we formulated this party. And when we started, you looked at the land titling issues, for example, under Bornham, it was 2.8 for his, 2.67 for his tenure. Then you go to the PPP, it was about 1.68, and then you go to the APNO AFC, it was actually -1 in terms of land rights. And these are issues dating back to 1814. So when the Liberty and Justice Party was launched, it was launched out of a recognition that all the political parties have simply had puppets in these various ministries and pretty much placed there to placate the indigenous population. If you look at the effectiveness of Sidney Allicock, Don Hastings, Norton, and Valerie Gridelo, they're not effective at all. They have not done a single thing that we could look at as changing the lives of indigenous peoples. If you look at the Pauline Sukai and the Vibert de Souza and the Duncan and all those guys, it was the same thing. The only indigenous minister that ever did anything of significance for indigenous peoples was actually Caroline Rodriguez, and she was shunned from the People's Progressive Party. Now, I'm not saying that to cast blame on the PPPC. I'm simply identifying that all of these ministers have occupied substantive posts simply as a means to placating the indigenous population without ever addressing the fundamental issues on the ground. So any administration, I'll make this very, very clear, any administration that wants to do their part to ensure that the most marginalized population, the first peoples of this country, find their rightful place and become part of society, then I'm all on board with that, because those are the marginalized people that we launched this party to help to address and to highlight. Now, if you look at, I remember I watched Timothy Jonas live for about 1 hour and 7 minutes a week and a half ago. And there is a list that he started to name off about legal minds, cricketers, doctors, and so on. You never once heard of Dr. George Norton. You never once heard of Mr. George Simon, arguably probably the only archaeologist from Guyana. George Norton was the best optical surgeon in the country before he got into politics. You know, you've got so many people who are unrecognized. Ovid Williams, for example, an indigenous man who speaks 6 or 7 of the 9 indigenous languages in Guyana. And I highlight those because it seems as though we are always overshadowed by the Indo and Afro population. When I went into the court during the trials, at least the hearings with these election processes and all these things, there is one thing that was very, very visibly clear in that court of law. It is that Guyana is populated with Indian and Afro-Guyanese lawyers. I have not seen yet in that court, I think we probably have 1 or 2, but I have not seen in that court through this proceedings, any of these things, a single indigenous lawyer being represented there. And I'm not saying that because I want to cry about it. I'm saying that there exists in society an inequity that needs to be corrected. And if called upon to address that, then I will most definitely do my part to help to ensure that there is equity in society and that indigenous peoples are not left behind as we continuously have been.
Well said, Lennox. Says Jennifer Motilal said Guyana is one of the richest Caricom country, and I would believe now with oil we will be the richest country. What? And I'm sure you also, President-elect Ali, I'm sure he would have read the autobiography of this Singapore leader. And I wanted to ask him that question directly, but I'm going to pose it to you. The Singapore model And as we all know, in the 60s, Guyana, Singapore were in the same third world country. We are still third world, they have moved up. But they dealt with three principles. One is that he ensured that those who he put in position, they merit that position. So we talk about meritocracy. So if you are given a job and you're qualified for the job and you're given some deliverables and you cannot deliver, then you must be removed, period. There should be no ifs and buts about it. Secondly, they were very pragmatic. What it means is that if something works, let it work. Whether it's a communist idea, it's a socialist idea, it's a capitalist idea, it's irrelevant. Once it works for the benefit of the people, let it work. And thirdly, he had a corruption and non-corruption committee. So that even as you know, says you mentioned before, even his minister, who went on a vacation paid by a businessman, was fired and put in prison because he deemed that corruption. Says you're not the president, at least not this time around. But would that be the hallmark, you think, of a President Ali's administration?
Well, I can't speak for President Ali. What I can speak to is the PPP Civics manifesto and what they plan to do, but we also have to incorporate that since that manifesto was published before the elections, we had COVID-19, which has turned our world upside down. So obviously there's lots of modification that has to be done to make sure that we're pragmatic in bringing human development to the people. So I want to just touch on the governance model that I have I've made aware of that will be coming on board because I was part of the Dr. Irfan Ali National COVID Task Force. So the first thing that we have to do is bring economic support back to those who fell through the cracks, because 30,000 of our people lost their jobs since election day to now. Now, it's not only elections. COVID-19 did do a lot of damage to our economy. COVID-19 actually destroyed about 20% of our economy so far, and it's not over yet. But in addition to that, COVID-19, the economic malaise and the political intransience is causing a lack of investor confidence and a lack of confidence generally by the consuming public. So the first measure that has to be done is what you call the economic support measure, which is to get some food onto the table of the most deserving immediately. That is like stage one. And that should have been done since yesterday, but unfortunately, I don't know what is going on in the current CDC and in the current administration, but clearly there are people who are falling through the cracks and desperately need basic food hampers. Then you have to ensure that you have and this is where the manifesto will kick in, the economic recovery model. As you would know, we are inheriting generally a bag of bones. For example, the checking account of the country called the National Deposit Account of the Central Bank. When the PPP left, it had $15 billion in cash in it. As at the end of April, it has an overdraft, or had an overdraft, because it's a dynamic account, of negative minus $92 billion. So that is $470 million US in debt that this country will have to fix immediately. When the PPP left office, they had $15 billion in gold. Today, there is about $0.7 billion in gold as we speak. So there's major challenges. Our foreign reserves has declined by over 120 million US dollars over the last 5 years, and oil prices are at their lowest today, and oil is our largest consumer of foreign currency. So I don't know why we're losing all of this foreign currency. So we have to, within the ambit of the manifesto, ensure that we have the economic recovery program. And I smile because I know Desmond Hoyt had an ERP, but something is necessary. We have to build back private sector-led investor confidence. We have to build back consumer confidence, where people started to buy again and feel confident to invest privately as well as the corporations. But then beyond that, we have to start getting the program of doing the large infrastructural projects that will transform Guyana to the level to put us on the path to a Singapore. We're talking about the Deepwater Harbor, the road to Brazil, the specialty hospital. There's 4 or 5 big projects that must be done to be able to position Guyana to unleash its potential. Now, you said that Guyana is supposed to be the richest country. In my opinion, when you look at potential with regards to natural resources and human capital, I am still of the belief that Guyana is potentially the richest country in the Caribbean, but of course it has been mismanaged over the years. And I mean, we had some good times and we had some bad times. But when you look at our entire life from the time when we left Singapore at about $300 per capita in the 60s to now, we generally as a people have failed. We have failed to deliver for our people enough because we have enough natural resources to do a better job. I am confident that this is the moment for us to actually do that mega transformation, to rejoin the race to becoming the Singapore of the Caribbean.
Good, sis. I know someone mentioned, I missed the name. Devin, you can help us. Someone says Guyana is not a third world country anymore. We are number 87 in the index of, all right, Latchman said it. We are now number 87. But we are 87, but still we are bankrupt. Because as you just mentioned, our balance of payment deficit in the Bank of Guyana, it's negative 80 billion.
92 billion.
82 billion. Our gold reserve is down. Our foreign reserve is only 2 months supply, so we're in a really, really bad state. When we come back, Rhonda and Lennox and Sis, I want you to use this platform tonight to tell the new president what is your agenda and what you expect him to do in the next 5 years. So when we come back, think of it and tell our president that is waiting to be sworn in, what do we expect from him in the next 5 years? We'll be back shortly.
Hello, this is Albert Baldio, your public advocate and former Democratic district leader. In these trying times, we need fresh leadership, tolerance, respect, and inclusion for all of us. God has heard our community's prayers that we overcome evil and get back to fighting for you. He has given us a bigger platform to fight for democracy also for our beloved Guyana. Please vote for me to become your next assemblyman. Absentee ballots have been mailed back to all who applied, but you can still apply for one now at nycabsentee.com, nycabsentee.com. The deadline ends soon. Tick off temporary illness and vote for Albert Baldio when the ballot comes back. You do not have to leave your home to vote in this election. This is about all of us, not me. Together we will fight, and together we will win. Please vote for me, Albert Baldio. Give me a chance to fight for you. God bless, and let's stand together.
January marks 1 year since Globespan 24x7 embarked on this initiative to offer a platform that brings in all sides, all points of view, and all concerns. Viewers in Guyana and across the world are participating in discussions that are bringing to light issues relating to social, economic, and political matters that have been plaguing our nation. Globespan's platform offers Guyanese to express their concerns and discuss solutions in the political realm, thereby addressing the polarized situation. Discussions also include social ills, such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicides that have been plaguing the people. The platform also mitigates the brain drain by having speakers that live in Guyana and across the world participate in these discussions. This concept will avail a broader view for the benefit of all Guyanese, so Globespan needs your support to offset the expenses. Kindly contribute by clicking the link in the description to help support these programs.
Okay, welcome back. And we want to thank you, viewers, for staying with us as we wrap up the program tonight. It has been very, very interesting. And I really want to thank Rhonda and Sis and Lennox for doing a fantastic job for us tonight. Rhonda, Sis, and Lennox, we are at the closing hours of the day. We're in the final innings, the final over of the innings. And hopefully tomorrow we will get the umpire will say this is the result and this is the declaration. Rhonda, we can start with you. What do you see happening in the next week? Well, starting tomorrow, do you think that the chairman will announce the result tomorrow? And after that, what? And after you're done, we'll ask Sis and Lennox to come in and tell us what will be the next, what happened in the next week.
I see court cases happening in the next week. If, I tell people it's not elections in Ghana unless we have a couple of court matters. In our case for 2020, we've had our fill of the courts. But realistically, I've said this publicly before, and I'm going to repeat it for our viewers. We are generally not a mature people politically. And many times, we enter the court, we hop up some courtroom steps to find a judicial solution for a political problem. So that's what I see happening. As far as I'm aware, in terms of what took place today, the commissioners are very tight-lipped in that sense. At least one PPP commissioner was. However, I don't think these innings are quite ready to be called by the umpire tomorrow. This is me just, I guess, I've lived long enough to see how this will play out, but I think we're still in for some more thrills. And so I see some hopping up some court steps for the rest of the week at least. Eventually, however, we're going to have to be mature about a number of things. The recount has happened. It has proceeded for all intents and purposes. The ballots were valid. We cannot, like Sis was saying earlier, we cannot disenfranchise persons who stepped in, stayed in line, and voted for issues of an electoral body, which, is beyond the control of any voter. And those voters have spoken loudly as to who they would like. So ultimately, for the rest of the week, the fat lady has not sung as yet. She's still waiting for her encore. So I think we should just be prepared for a little more patience and a little more, I don't know how much more patience we can have. As Sis rightfully said, our people are struggling. I've been in the field, I've been assisting where I can, and they're struggling. I've seen it with my own two eyes. But we're going to court.
Okay, Lennox, why will we have to go to court? For what? What purpose will it serve? Or what will be if Rhonda is right? And I think I concur with her as well that may be the next step. But what will be the matter going to court? To what? To stop the swearing in? To stop the declaration? What do you think will be that if ever it comes to court?
Charles, you're asking me to speculate on something that I'm ill prepared for right now, whether it is intellectually, emotionally, or any other, physically. But that being said, I think at some point the APNO AFC may want to challenge the declaration, may want to stop the swearing in, they may want to seek an injunction to deny Dr. Irfan Ali his position as the elected leader of the country. They may want to find a way to set aside the electoral results. As we are sure Vincent Alexander and Trotman and Corbyn they're already doing it. And I don't anticipate that Mr. Granger is going to be willing to accept that they would have lost these elections. If you look at it, and I want to throw this analysis out there, if you look at it, it is no longer the APNU versus the PPP. It is the rest of the world and democracy against one political party that wants to hijack that democracy, and that is the APNU-AFC. The rest of the world against the APNU-AFC simply in trying to protect the democracy. When we think that there is logic or good logic will prevail, they have shown that they're not willing to accept logic. They're not willing to take any formula that says that they would have lost. So over the next few days, we could expect a lot of arguments from the commission or within the commission. Mr. Alexander is going to do his usual, throw his spoon in there and stir the mud so that the water never gets clear. And I think part of that is that they have to find a way to justify to the electorate or their base that they actually have something to hold them together. Because come 2025, if they're simply to chuck it in now and say, look, we have cheated, we got caught, or we tried to cheat, we got caught, and now we have to take our licks, as Mr. Gonzalez puts it, then their base is going to say, well, why should I follow these leaders? So they have to find something for their base to coalesce around, and that is simply to say these elections, we got cheated out of it. That way they don't lose, they don't completely get demolished. You asked a question earlier as to what I would expect of the incoming president. I think I've stated very clearly in the previous 15 minutes, I'd say, as to what it is that we are pushing for, which is equity. And the People's Progressive Party, Civic, I'm sure, has a lot of experts in a variety of fields. So I will not attempt to overstep into what it is that they cannot do or what they should or should not do. CS has already mentioned they have a manifesto plan. I've read parts of that manifesto. Some of it is actually quite sound. But I also notice absent in there is the comprehensive economic liberation or emancipation of indigenous peoples. I have not seen that in any manifesto. And I want to impart that if there is anything that needs to be done, that is one component of it. There are multiple things. When we talk about the economic emancipation of indigenous peoples, it is an all-encompassing plan that deals with everything from education, reduction of poverty, infrastructure, and a future. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Sis, in answering that question, I know Mr. Nandalal did wrote to the registrar of the High Court and the Court of Appeal, saying that if any petition is filed to the court, he would like opportunity to give the PVP's submission before any decision is made. Now let's assume that Rhonda is correct and something is filed. What do you see happening? And if that doesn't happen, what do we see happening next week? And having said that, Dr. Rose raised a point saying that about GECOM itself, and I want to go back to GECOM. He said, no one in Guyana really have confidence in GECOM anymore. So maybe we should propose disband GECOM and form a new organization called Guyana Election Management Body or something like that. Because GECOM is a tainted name now. Nobody wants to hear the word GECOM anymore. Replace it to make the announcement. Will the new government make the announcement as soon as they take office, you think? Your mute is on.
Sorry about that. It's just that I prefer to be on mute sometimes. I prefer to fairly respond to the question on what do I see over the next 3 days. I've listened to Rhonda, and I've listened also to Lennox. And I want to dwell in the realms of hope. And Desmond Tutu had basically said once upon a time, hope is being able to see that there's light despite all of the darkness that we're in. Yes, Guyana has walked through a very dark period in the last few, 100 days, whereby it was real darkness to see. I know for sure Rhonda was there and others. It was real darkness as a Guyanese person who's not so young anymore to see Mr. Mingo imposed a false number and a false narrative on us. It felt helpless. It's the worst that I've felt as a Guyanese in my entire public life. I've never felt so helpless when I was sitting in that back room, the media room, when he was foisting himself. It felt like rape, like if somebody was raping me when he was doing that. And I hold Mr. Mingo personally accountable for what he did, because by stealing those votes, he raped a lot of Guyanese people. But I feel a lot of hope today. I feel in the next 3 days, I'm expecting Madam Chair to declare Dr. Irfan Ali in the new day. Because if you look at the order, the outside limit for the declaration is tomorrow. Tomorrow is the day. So I'm expecting her to do justice by Guyana and declare Dr. Irfan Ali in accordance with the valid votes cast as the president of Guyana tomorrow. People may try to challenge it in the courts, and it will take a very brave judge to entertain such such a variance from the norm. But it's only fair. Everybody has a right to approach a court. But what I can say, they will have to come with facts and not fiction. And all I have seen coming from the people identifying with Congress Place is a bunch of fiction. But I want to point you to what Madam Chair had said many days ago, when the first set of fiction came to her table. She said, "He who asserts must prove." And I have been witness to several weeks of allegation. 8,000 discipline service votes were not stamped. When you drill down, you found it was less than 100, and those were not necessarily discipline service votes. We didn't know whether it was civilian votes or discipline service votes. And when you drill down to the boxes that the discipline service were merged, it was even less than that. So the reality is, it is a lot of fiction, a lot of false narrative. And the utensils belonging to Congress Place have continued even on to this day. I mean, I think a few days ago, one of the utensils spouted the narrative that 14-year-olds were voting in the elections, which is ludicrous. Any Guyanese who've been through the 2020 election day proceedings, and I have, will know that we have something called a folio in the polling station, which has the photograph of the eligible voter. And on all of those folios, there's no children on it. So clearly, you got to come real good if you want to run to court this time. So for the next 3 days, I am hopeful, and I'm expecting Madam Chair to declare Dr. Irfan Ali as the president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana.
Thank you, Faith. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, Rhonda, tell the president in waiting what you expect to see in his administration, and tell us anything else you want to say in closing.
I expect the incoming administration to be a representative of all of the people of Guyana. We have, this was literally the mother of all elections. And what we have, if nothing else, is a completely fractured society. The incoming president has his hands full in order to be, a representative of all of the people. There is a lot of distrust in the society. I would like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I would like some serious thought be given to it. We have a society of a lot of hearts rolling around, not from now. When I have 18-year-olds talking to me about Burnham and what Burnham did, that is a generational aspect being passed down. And there are genuine hurts being experienced by Afro-Guyanese in this country that we have to address. We have to address all of the hurts that exist for our people. If we truly, truly are serious about our motto, one people, one nation, one destiny, as it is, as I'm sitting here tonight, as much as I want to be as hopeful as Sace is, I'm not sure that I can say with certainty that any singular person can address it. But we have to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We have to address the hurts, and it will take a large section of our population in terms of moving that aspect forward. The second thing that I am concerned about as a teacher, COVID has decimated our education system in the sense that there's not been a study in terms of numbers and things like that, but there are a lot of children in this country who from March to now, have had haphazard gap blocks of education happening for them. And so that is something that has to be addressed. The new school term is, approaching in September. We still haven't gotten COVID quite under control yet. And so that is another issue that has to be taken into consideration. So an incoming president at this point has his hands full. And I'm no economist, but listening to the numbers that SACE has, highlighted in this program makes me pause. I've seen the numbers, but, explaining it as SACE would have done and those kinds of things. So there are a number of factors that we're facing. We also have to deal with issues of oil and how it will affect our economy and those kinds of things. So my wish list is so long that I probably need an hour plus to tell you all about it. I promised myself that once we had a declared president, I would, send this list of things I wanted done. But I want to put the incoming president on notice that this is not 5 years ago. This is not, 2 seconds ago. The young people of this country will no longer stand for mediocrity. We're expecting qualified people to be placed in positions and we are expecting performance. If nothing else, we have shown that we don't mind voting you out of power if it comes to that. And so that is me summarizing this long wish list that I have at this point.
Thank you, Rhonda. And I see why the TCI nominated you for the candidate. You have spoken very well. And I hope that the president calls you to serve, that you will be prepared to serve. Also, I will send Santa Claus to you to give him that list that you have. And I hope that he will work with it. Lennox, any time to close, what do you want to say in terms of any recommendation to the president?
I think I would have said enough as to what I would like to see, Charles. If I were to add anything, it would be for us to transform Guyana into two things. A just society, where people don't have to wait years and months and deny justice just because they cannot speak a language. Take, for example, right now, there is a Carib youth who is on remand and they cannot find a translator for him, so he cannot find justice because even if they found a translator, they cannot afford to have them in Georgetown long enough. They can't pay them and all these things. So that in itself is a denial of justice. If you think of the indigenous peoples, we are the only population that is spread across all regions of Guyana. There is no other population spread in that manner. And when you think about the denial of justice, we need to transform Guyana into a just society. That obviously with the meritocracy, and I support some of Rwanda's there. And I hope that if a TRC established, that it is not only confined to the Afro and Indo population, because often the indigenous population continues to be overlooked. You talk about what is happening in the US right now, Black Lives Matter. What we need in Guyana is an Indigenous Lives Matter, because while we may not have a privileged Indo or Afro class in that sense, we most definitely have an underprivileged indigenous population. And I will close it there.
Thank you, Lennox. That's why my recommendation, again, if the president calls you to serve, you have a lot of things that you need to get done for your people. Sis, in closing, you want to say anything to the president? I know you speak to him often, but public now.
I want to publicly leave on the record that I am a strong advocate for meritocracy. I believe Guyana is ripe for meritocracy. The days of square pegs and round holes is over. And any political force who decides that they want to reward square pegs in round hole, beware. The people of Guyana is not going to tolerate it anymore. But I also want to appeal to His Excellency the President. This is the time for national healing and reconciliation. A lot of wrongs were done, but you know what? Even I personally felt injustice meted out to me, but it's yesterday's news. And I want to quote from the Quran, because I know our president is a Muslim. And the Quran says, but whoever pardons and make reconciliation, his reward is due from Allah. And it tells you the power of scriptures, whether it's Christianity, Islamic scriptures, Hinduism, or any other religion. It is a guiding force for us at these difficult moments when we have to all, and I know the president elect is now he's alone. He's at the pedestal. He's going to be migrating into a statesman role where he's alone. There's only one president of the country. And I want to appeal to him. A lot of wrongdoings were done to him during this period. It's an injustice to have denied him his rightful position as the duly elected president of Guyana. But forgive. I'm appealing to him. Let us reach out together as brothers and sisters of all called Guyanese in a framework of national reconciliation. We got to find out why we're always at war at election time. And we need to fix that. Whether it's a constitutional framework, I don't have the answers, because I think the people of Guyana have the answers. And this is the time when more of us need to listen to the people and craft the solutions required as we build this nation. But my pet peeve I always like is, I would like my president, he's a project management professional. So I would like to appeal to him to projectize every action in this country so we can take things from conception to delivery and to closure, meaning everything is in a project so we can have more successes. Because Guyanese and human beings, we celebrate successes. And so that people can see more house lots going out, more economic empowerment going out, more jobs being created, more investor confidence being generated, and there's more of the pie so that we can share more of this corn to more Guyanese. That is my appeal to him. And please, let's move forward. We got to move forward. We cannot be bogged down by what happened over the last 100 days.
Thank you, Sis. And Chan Prasad mentioned, let the past be the past. Forgiveness is the way to go. And Jennifer Motilal says that Guyana will rise again. Having said that, before you come on, Lennox, I want to read this poem that came to me by Ron Chung.
Yep.
A poem
I need to interrupt you.
Yeah,
I need to interrupt you. I just want to say good night to Ray and Sis and yourself and all of the viewers. My battery is literally going to die, so I don't think I'll last through the first lines of your poem. But thank you so much for this opportunity, and we'll talk.
All right, stay on if you can. But it says, by Rabindranath Tagore, it says, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments but narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Beautiful words from Rabindranath Tagore to our country. To you, Rhonda, to you, Sis, to Lennox, and to all our viewers out there. We want, on behalf of this program, on behalf of Noir Singh and Devin and all of us here on Globespan, we want to wish our incoming president a very successful term in office, and we look forward to tomorrow, the chairman of the Elections Commission declaring the candidate of the People's Progressive Party as the winner of the election. And soon thereafter, the chancellor will swear in the new president. And as Say said, we will move on together. As Rhonda said, there's a wish list of so many things, but I believe together we will achieve great things in Guyana. As Jennifer said, Guyana will rise again. God bless all of you, and God bless our dear country. Thank you guys so much for a good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Goodbye.